In the quiet town of Makara, a young tailor named Bako arrived one sunny morning with a small bag, an old sewing machine, and a dream in his heart. He had traveled from village to village, hoping to find a place to start his own shop. Bako's father had been a tailor before him, but after his passing, life became hard. Still, Bako promised himself that one day he would have a shop of his own, a place where his work could bring pride to his father's name. When Bako reached Makara, he looked around the marketplace. The place was full of life. Women selling fruits, children running around, men shouting prices for their goods. He walked from stall to stall, asking about rooms for rent. But the rent in the market was too high for him. He only had a few coins left, just enough to eat and repair his old sewing machine. That evening, tired and hungry, Bako sat by the roadside. He looked at the people closing their shops and felt a little sad. Maybe tomorrow will be better, he said to himself. As he sat there, an old man with kind eyes and a cane walked by. His name was Mosi, the caretaker of the nearby cemetery. Mosi stopped and asked, "You look lost, young man. Are you new here?" Bako nodded. "Yes, sir. I'm a tailor. I want to open a shop, but I don't have enough money for rent." The old man smiled and thought for a while. "There's a small shed near the cemetery. It's old and quiet, but you can use it. The rent is very low." Bako's eyes brightened. "Thank you, sir. That would be wonderful." But Mosi raised a hand and said softly, "There's something you should know. People say that place is haunted. They believe the spirits of the dead walk there at night. No one dares to stay nearby." Bako paused for a moment, then smiled calmly. "The dead won't harm me," he said. "I fear only hearts without kindness." The old man looked surprised but nodded slowly. "You are brave, young tailor. If you truly wish to take it, it's yours." The next morning, Bako carried his sewing machine and a few rolls of fabric to the small shed near the cemetery. The shed was dusty and quiet, but it had a strong roof and enough space for his table. From the window, he could see rows of graves surrounded by tall grass and flowers. Birds sang in the trees above, and though the place was peaceful, it had an air of mystery too. Bako cleaned the place, set up his table, and hung a small sign outside, "Bako's Fine Stitches, Clothes for All." He spent the whole day arranging his fabrics, oiling his sewing machine, and planning designs. By evening the shop looked neat and welcoming. As night fell, the streets of Makara grew silent. Only the sound of crickets filled the air. Bako sat at his table under the soft light of a lantern, mending an old shirt. He felt a little lonely but not afraid. "Work is my best friend," he whispered to himself. Suddenly he heard footsteps outside, slow and careful. He turned his head, but there was no one there. The wind blew gently, shaking the door. Bako smiled and said, "It's just the wind." He went back to sewing. The next day a few curious people passed by. Some stared at him, others whispered, "That's the new tailor who works near the cemetery. Poor boy, he won't last a week." But Bako didn't mind. He greeted everyone with a smile, hoping that kindness could change their hearts. A few days later, a woman named Amina stopped by. She was carrying her husband's torn trousers. "Are you not afraid to work here?" she asked, handing him the cloth. Bako laughed lightly. "If I'm afraid of ghosts, I'll never make a living. Let me fix this for you." His gentle manner made Amina smile. When she returned the next day, her trousers were neatly repaired. She told others, "That young tailor works well and charges little." Slowly, word began to spread, though many still avoided the place after dark. At night, Bako continued his work by lamplight. The soft sound of his sewing machine filled the quiet air. Sometimes he heard faint whispers or felt a cool breeze through the window. But he wasn't frightened. Instead, he spoke softly as if to unseen listeners, "Don't worry. I'm only here to sew and make peace." One evening, as the moon shone bright over the graves, Bako finished a child's dress and hung it by the door. He looked at the cemetery and said a small prayer for whoever rested there. In that moment, a strange calm surrounded him, as if unseen eyes watched him with kindness. The next morning he found fresh white flowers on his doorstep. No one in town knew who placed them there. Bako simply smiled and said, "Maybe someone liked my work." Days passed and his shop became part of the town's story. Some feared it, others respected it. But everyone admired Bako's courage and hard work. He never shouted, never complained. He greeted the living with a smile and the dead with peace. He often told Mosi, "I came here with nothing, but now I have purpose. This place is quiet and I can hear my own thoughts. The spirits, if they are here, have good manners, they don't disturb my stitching." Mosi would laugh and reply, "Maybe they enjoy your company." And so, near the quiet cemetery, a young tailor named Bako built his dream with needle and thread. He found beauty where others saw fear and peace where others imagined ghosts. His little shop, though small and humble, began to shine like a lantern in the dark. For Bako, it wasn't just a shop, it was a new beginning, proof that courage and kindness could turn even the loneliest place into home. For many days, Bako sat alone in his little shop near the cemetery. The days passed quietly and no one came to buy or repair clothes. Sometimes children would run past his shop, laughing and pointing, saying, "That's where the ghosts live." Then they would disappear down the road before the sun began to set. Bako didn't mind. He spent his time sewing old fabric pieces together, practicing new stitches and cleaning his machine. Every morning he would sweep the floor, wipe his table and wait. He believed that one day someone would walk through that door. Good work always finds its way, he often told himself. The nights near the cemetery were silent, except for the sound of crickets and the wind brushing through the grass. The moonlight often slipped through the window, casting long shadows across the room. Still, Bako worked late, his small lamp flickering as his hands moved skillfully over cloth. One cool evening when the moon was full and the air felt heavy, Bako sat finishing a blue shirt. He was almost done when he heard the sound of footsteps outside, slow, firm and steady. He thought it might be Mosi, the old caretaker, coming to visit. But when he looked out the window, the road was empty. A moment later, the door creaked open. A tall man stepped inside. His clothes were old and torn, made from a fabric that Bako had never seen before. The man's face was calm, but his eyes looked distant, like someone lost in thought. He spoke softly, "Can you fix this coat?" Bako nodded politely and took the coat. The fabric was cold to the touch and had a strange smell, not bad but different, like something that had been kept away for many years. "Yes, I can fix it," Bako said. "Please, you can sit while I work." But when he looked up again, the chair beside the table was empty. The man was gone. The door hadn't moved and the air inside felt still. Bako blinked in surprise. "Maybe he stepped outside," he said quietly. He waited for a moment, then shrugged and began to sew. He worked carefully, stitching the torn sleeves and mending the loose buttons. The fabric was soft yet strong, and his needle slid smoothly through it. As he sewed, he thought about the man's face, kind but tired, like someone who had carried many memories. When he finished, he folded the coat neatly and placed it on the table. The clock on the wall ticked softly and soon the night grew deeper. Bako yawned and decided to rest. He told himself, he will come for his coat in the morning. When dawn arrived, sunlight spilled through the cracks in the window. Birds began to sing and Bako woke to the warmth of morning. He stretched his arms, walked to the table and stopped. The coat was gone. He looked around the small shop carefully, thinking maybe he had moved it somewhere else. But no, it had disappeared. In its place, lying on the table, was a single silver coin. It shone brightly in the sunlight as if freshly polished. Bako picked it up and turned it in his hand. It was heavier than any coin he had seen before, and there was an engraving of a sun and moon on both sides. He smiled softly. "So, my first customer has paid me," he said aloud. He didn't feel fear. Instead, he felt a quiet joy in his heart. Whoever that man was, living or not, he had trusted Bako's work. Later that morning, Mosi came by with his walking stick. "You look happy today, my boy," he said. "Did business finally come your way?" Bako nodded and showed him the silver coin. "A man came last night. He asked me to fix his coat. When I woke up, the coat was gone, but this coin was here." Mosi frowned slightly. "A man came at night? What did he look like?" Bako described the tall figure and the old clothes. Mosi's eyes widened slowly. He sighed and said, "That sounds like Kido, the trader who died many years ago. He used to live in Makara. People buried him with his favorite coat, the same one you just described." Bako looked at the coin again, his heart beating a little faster. But instead of fear, a calm smile appeared on his face. "Then maybe he wanted to wear it again," he said softly. Mosi shook his head in disbelief. "You should move your shop, Bako. This place is not safe." But Bako only laughed gently. "Safe or not, he came to me with respect. I fixed his coat and he paid me honestly. That is good enough for me." Word spread quickly through the town. Children whispered it to one another and women told the story at the well. "The spirits visit the tailor near the graves," they said. Some spoke with wonder, others with fear. In the evenings, curious faces peeked at Bako's shop from afar. Some crossed the road rather than walked too close. But Bako continued his work, sewing calmly as if nothing unusual had happened. One night, a group of young men passed by and dared each other to knock on Bako's door. "Let's see if the ghosts come out," they laughed. But when they reached the shop, the air grew cold, and they heard the faint sound of a sewing machine humming inside. There was no light, yet the rhythmic tapping continued. Frightened, they ran away shouting, "The tailor works with spirits." Bako, who had simply fallen asleep with his machine still running, never even noticed. The sound they heard was only the wind brushing against the needle. Days turned into weeks. People stayed curious but kept their distance. Sometimes, a villager would quietly bring torn clothes and leave them by his door, too afraid to enter. By morning they would find the clothes neatly fixed with a note saying, "No charge today." Even the old caretaker, Mosi, began to look at Bako's shop differently. "Maybe," he said one day, "the dead simply admire your work." Bako smiled at that. "Then I will keep sewing," he said. "If my hands can bring peace to anyone, living or gone, I will be happy." And so, near the quiet cemetery of Makara, the tailor who fixed a ghost's coat became the talk of the town. While others saw mystery and fear, Bako saw only trust and kindness. He never stopped working, for he believed that every stitch he made carried a story, and sometimes even the spirits wanted their stories mended too. Fear began to spread across the town of Makara after people heard the story of Bako's ghostly customer. Some said the tailor was blessed, others said he was cursed. A few villagers claimed they saw strange lights near his shop at night, like small stars floating in the air. Mothers told their children not to go near the cemetery road after sunset, and even the bravest men crossed the street when passing his shop. But Bako stayed calm. Every morning he swept his floor, dusted his sewing machine and began his work with the same quiet smile. He didn't try to explain anything to the people. He only said, "I came here to sew, not to fear." He worked with patience, repairing old clothes and stitching new ones for the few who still trusted him. The silver coin from the mysterious man remained on a shelf beside his lamp. Sometimes when the light hit it, it shone like the morning sun. Bako would look at it and whisper, "Whoever you are, thank you for believing in my hands." As days turned into weeks, his shop became more than just a workplace. It became a place of peace. During the day, the cemetery behind his shop looked quiet and lonely, covered with wildflowers and tall grass. But at night the air changed. The wind carried soft murmurs that sounded almost like voices. The first time he heard them, Bako paused. He looked up from his sewing table and listened carefully. It wasn't frightening, it was gentle, almost like a song carried by the breeze. He smiled and said softly, "Good evening, whoever you are." Then he went back to sewing. That night, while he stitched a woman's shawl, he heard a whisper behind him. It was clear, like someone speaking just beside his ear. The voice said, "You sew with care." "Thank you." He turned around slowly, but there was no one there. Only the soft glow of his lantern and the moonlight streaming through the window. He felt no fear. Instead, he felt warmth, as if unseen eyes watched him with kindness. He whispered back, "You are welcome." The next night, the whispers returned. They came softly, like wind through dry leaves. Some spoke in words, some only in sighs. He couldn't always understand them, but he felt their meaning. They spoke of old days, lost clothes, forgotten memories. They didn't sound angry or sad, only longing for something they once loved. Soon, Bako noticed that sometimes, when he woke in the morning, there were pieces of cloth on his table that he hadn't seen before. They were old and delicate, some torn, some faded. He would mend them with care, fold them neatly and leave them by the window. By morning they would be gone. He didn't tell anyone. He didn't need to. One night, as he worked under the dim light, a soft glow appeared near the door. It was not like firelight or candlelight. It was gentler, like the glow of the moon resting on mist. Slowly from that light, a figure appeared, an old woman wearing a white wrapper and a kind smile. Her face was wrinkled but peaceful. Bako froze for a moment, then bowed his head politely. "Good evening, Mama," he said. The old woman smiled. "Do not fear, my son," she said in a voice that sounded like a lullaby. "I am called Mama Lela. I used to live here long ago. You remind me of my son, who was a tailor too." Bako smiled faintly. "I am honored, Mama. What can I do for you?" She looked down at her torn shawl, the edges faded and thin. "This was the last thing my son made for me," she said softly. "I have worn it for many years, even after I left the world of the living. It has become weak. Can you make it whole again?" Bako nodded gently. "Yes, Mama. Sit, please." She laughed softly. "I have not sat in a chair for a long time," she said. But somehow, the chair moved slightly, and she seemed to rest beside his table. He took her shawl carefully as if it were made of clouds. The fabric was light as air. He began to sew quietly, each stitch straight and neat. As he worked, Mama Lela hummed an old tune, a song about rain and blessings. The sound filled the small shop like a prayer. When he finished, he held out the shawl. It looked whole again, the tears gone, the fabric strong. Mama Lela touched it and smiled. "You mend more than cloth," she said softly. "You mend our memories too." Bako lowered his head. "I only do what I know, Mama." She smiled again, her figure glowing brighter. "Then keep doing it, child. We have many stories to mend." And with that, she faded slowly into the light until the room was still again. Bako sat quietly, his hands resting on the table. The air smelled of jasmine and peace. He whispered to himself, "She was kind. She missed her son." He looked at his sewing machine and smiled. "Maybe I can help her remember him." From that night on, the whispers grew friendlier. Sometimes he felt a gentle hand touch his shoulder as he worked. Other times, his lamp flickered brighter when he was tired, as if someone unseen encouraged him to keep going. One evening he found a small white flower on his table, fresh, glowing faintly. He placed it beside the silver coin. "You are welcome," he said softly. "All of you." Though the townspeople stayed away, Bako never felt alone. He worked every day, serving both the living and the spirits who trusted his hands. His shop became a bridge between two worlds, a quiet place where kindness replaced fear. And even when the nights grew long and the wind whispered through the graves, the young tailor sat peacefully at his sewing table, stitching not just torn garments, but the gentle, forgotten stories of Makara's past. As Bako's shop became known throughout Makara, some people began to see him differently. Many respected his calm nature and gentle heart, but not everyone was happy about his growing reputation. Among the merchants in town was a man named Kando, a trader who sold expensive imported clothes. He was proud, loud, and very jealous of anyone who earned praise. For many years, Kando had been the richest man in Makara's market. But since people began talking about Bako, things changed. Some of Kando's regular customers went to the tailor near the cemetery instead. They said Bako's work had a special touch, that his stitches seemed to bring comfort, not just beauty. Kando laughed when he first heard this. "A tailor who talks to ghosts? How foolish," he said to his workers. "People are too simple. They'll believe anything if it sounds like magic." But inside, jealousy burned. He could not accept that a young man with an old sewing machine and a shop near graves was more loved than him. One evening, as he sat in his shop counting coins, he slammed his fist on the table. "I will prove to everyone that Bako is a liar," he said to himself. He began asking questions in the marketplace, pretending to be curious. "Have you seen the tailor at night?" he asked. "Do you really think ghosts help him?" Some said yes, others shook their heads. But all agreed that strange things happen near that shop. Kando decided he would see it with his own eyes. "If I find out he is playing tricks, I will tell the whole town," he muttered. The night was cool when Kando set out. The moon hung low and a thin mist covered the cemetery road. He walked quietly, wearing a dark cloak so no one would see him. When he reached the back of Bako's shop, he hid behind a large tree and waited. Inside, Bako was sewing as usual. The small lamp on his table glowed softly. From where Kando hid, he could see through the window. He waited for something strange to happen, but everything looked ordinary. Bako worked with quiet focus, his needle moving in smooth, steady motions. Hours passed and Kando grew impatient. "This fool is just sewing," he whispered. "Where are his ghosts?" Just as he was about to leave, a sudden wind blew through the trees. The light in the shop flickered. Kando squinted through the glass and froze. Soft white light began to fill the room. Slowly, shapes began to form beside Bako. 1, 2, 3, glowing figures standing around his table. Some looked like men, others like women, all dressed in gentle colors that shimmered like moonlight. They moved their hands as if helping Bako sew, their faces calm and kind. Kando's mouth went dry. He rubbed his eyes, thinking it was a trick of the light. But when he looked again, the figures were still there. One of them, an elderly woman with a bright shawl, turned her head toward the window, directly toward Kando. Her eyes glowed softly, not angry but knowing. Terrified, Kando stumbled back and fell into the grass. He tried to run, but his feet tangled. "Ghosts? Ghosts?" he shouted as he scrambled to his feet and fled down the road, dropping his cloak behind him. His cries echoed through the sleeping town. Villagers woke up and rushed out with torches. "What happened?" they asked. "Who's screaming?" "It's Kando," someone shouted. He came from the cemetery road. When they found him near the well, shaking and pale, he pointed toward the hill. "The tailor. His shop is full of spirits," he cried. They were glowing, sewing beside him. The crowd gasped. Some looked frightened, others curious. Together they marched toward Bako's shop, torches lighting the night. Dogs barked and the wind grew louder as the crowd approached. But when they reached the little shed, they saw only one light, the soft glow of Bako's lamp. Inside, Bako sat quietly at his table, sewing children's uniforms. There were piles of blue and white fabric beside him. His face looked calm and peaceful. He looked up and smiled when he saw the crowd. "Good evening, friends. Is something wrong?" The people looked around, expecting to see strange figures or hear whispers. But there was nothing, no glowing lights, no ghosts, no wind. Only the steady sound of Bako's sewing machine. Kando pushed forward, his voice trembling. "I saw them. I saw the ghosts." Bako paused his sewing and looked kindly at him. "Maybe you saw kindness," he said softly. "When you work with peace in your heart, good things appear, but not to frighten anyone. Only to remind us that love never dies." Some villagers frowned, confused. Others nodded slowly, their fear fading. One woman stepped forward and looked at the uniforms on Bako's table. "These are for the orphanage," she said, recognizing the small sizes. Bako smiled. "Yes. Some children in Makara have no parents. I sew for them at night. It keeps me company." The people exchanged looks. The anger in the crowd melted away. Someone whispered, "Maybe the spirits he sees are the good souls blessing his work." An old man placed his torch down and said, "If there are ghosts here, they must be gentle ones." The crowd began to disperse. Some stayed for a moment, watching as Bako continued his sewing, calm as ever. Kando stood still, his face red with shame. As the villagers walked away, Mosi, the old caretaker, came forward. He looked at Kando and said quietly, "Some eyes see only fear, others see blessing. What did you choose to see tonight?" Kando lowered his head, unable to answer. Bako stood, walked to him, and gently handed him his cloak. "You drop this," he said. "Next time don't hide in the dark. Come during the day. I can make you a fine shirt for your trouble." Kando took the cloak silently. For the first time he noticed how warm Bako's smile was, not proud, not mocking, only kind. The next morning the people of Makara spoke of what had happened. Some said Kando had imagined the ghost. Others said the spirits had revealed themselves only to teach him a lesson. But one thing everyone agreed on, the tailor's heart was pure and his shop was not cursed. From that night, no one feared the cemetery road again. Children began walking there to watch Bako work, and he would sometimes tell them stories as he sewed. Even Kando, though embarrassed, started to greet him with respect when passing by. The people of Makara slowly understood what Bako had always known, that kindness and peace invite blessings, not curses. And sometimes, even in the quietest places, light can appear to those who work with love. Years passed, and Bako's small sewing shop near the cemetery became something special in Makara. What had once been a lonely, quiet shed was now a place full of laughter, warmth, and peace. People from nearby villages began visiting, not only to have their clothes made but to spend time near the tailor who was known for his calm heart and gentle hands. At first, most came out of curiosity. They had heard the old stories, of spirits visiting Bako at night, of lights glowing softly in his window, of how fear had turned into faith. But when they arrived they found no ghosts, no strange magic. They found only a kind man with a quiet smile, sitting behind his sewing machine, working patiently with the same care as he had on his first day. Bako never turned anyone away. Whether someone brought fine silk or torn rags, he treated every piece of cloth with respect. "Each thread has a story," he would say softly. "When you mend something with love, it becomes whole again." The townspeople began to notice something beautiful. Whenever Bako finished sewing for someone, the person left feeling lighter, almost peaceful. It was as if his kindness was stitched into every seam. A farmer once said, "When I wear the shirt Bako made, I feel calm even on hard days." A widow whispered, "His clothes carry comfort, as if someone prays for you with every stitch." Soon people began bringing not just clothes, but hearts that needed mending. Some came to tell him their troubles. Some came just to sit near him in silence. The sound of his sewing machine became like music, steady, soft, and healing. Bako would listen kindly to everyone. He did not speak much, but his eyes showed understanding. Sometimes when someone cried he would hand them a piece of cloth and say, "Hold this. Remember, no tear is too deep to be mended." Even children began to love the cemetery road. Once feared for its ghosts, it became a safe path lined with flowers. Bako often planted small bushes around the graves and asked the children to help water them. The dead deserve beauty too, he told them. Little by little, the land around the cemetery changed. Bright marigolds bloomed where weeds once grew. Birds began to nest in the trees. The air that was once cold and heavy felt fresh and peaceful. People started calling it the Garden of Rest. Some came there to pray, others came simply to sit and feel calm. Every evening when the sun dipped behind the hills, Bako would step outside and watch the light fade gently over the graves. He often whispered, "Peace is the best kind of life, and the best kind of death." One day, a group of travelers arrived from a distant town. They had heard stories of the tailor who worked among the dead and brought peace to the living. Their leader, a noble woman, stepped into Bako's shop holding a torn silk robe. "Can you fix this?" she asked softly. "It was my mother's. I thought it was beyond repair." Bako took the cloth gently, studying it. "It can be mended," he said with a smile. "Nothing is too broken when handled with care." The woman stayed for 3 days while Bako worked. When she received her robe back, it looked whole again, but not perfect. The stitches were visible, neat and honest. She touched them and smiled. "You didn't hide the scars," she said. Bako nodded. "Scars remind us that something was once hurt but still survived. That is beauty too." Before leaving, the woman told everyone she met about the tailor of Makara, the man who sewed not for gold but for peace. Soon word spread far and wide. Travelers from other villages, traders, even city folk began visiting his shop. Some came for clothes, others just to meet him. Yet despite the fame, Bako never changed. He still lived simply, still shared his food with children who passed by, and still lit a candle every night for the spirits he once sewed for. The people of Makara came to love him deeply. They began taking care of the garden near his shop, planting flowers, trimming the grass and cleaning the old gravestones. The cemetery that had once been a place of fear became a symbol of peace for the whole town. People started calling it Bako's Garden. Lovers came there to walk hand in hand, old men came to rest under the shade, and mothers brought their children to play among the flowers. One afternoon, as Bako sat outside sewing under the big mango tree, a young boy approached him. "Uncle Bako," the boy said, "were you never afraid of the ghosts?" Bako chuckled softly. "No, little one. The dead do not harm the living. It is only hearts filled with hate that cause fear." The boy thought for a moment, then smiled. "So you are not afraid of anything?" Bako looked toward the horizon and said gently, "I am afraid of forgetting kindness. When we stop being kind, the world becomes darker." Those words stayed in the boy's heart. Many years later, he would tell his grandchildren about the wise tailor who lived beside the graves and taught Makara the meaning of peace. As Bako grew older, his hands became slower, but his smile never faded. The people often came to visit him, bringing gifts, fruits, bread, and new thread for his work. But Bako always gave more than he received. One evening he sat quietly at his table, looking at his old sewing machine. The sound of children laughing outside filled the air. He smiled and whispered, "Where others see fear, I see faith." Then he closed his eyes and rested. When morning came, the people found him sitting peacefully, a half-finished shirt still under his needle. The whole town mourned, but there was no sadness in their tears, only love. They buried him in the garden he had created, under the tree where he used to sew. Years passed and people continued to visit his grave. Some brought flowers, others brought clothes to mend as an offering of gratitude. His shop remained standing and young tailors came to learn there. They said, "If you sew here, you must sew with kindness as Bako did." Makara became known as the town of gentle hands. The story of Bako spread across the land, the tailor who turned fear into faith, death into peace and loneliness into love. And so, even after he was gone, his spirit lived on in every stitch, every flower in the garden, and every heart that learned from him. His life taught Makara a simple truth, that courage and kindness can bring light, even among the deepest shadows.